All right, let's get to it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our Advanced Amazon Holiday Advertising Strategies for Sustained Growth. I'm Julia Gall, Product Marketing Manager at Mayan, and I'm here with Andrew, who is not only a Mayan Senior Account Manager, but also a multi-million-dollar seller himself. And Andrew, maybe you can just share a little bit more about yourself and your background in e-commerce.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I've been in e-commerce for almost 7 years now. I started in Amazon in about 2016. It's actually sort of a unique case because I actually didn't start my products on Amazon. When I first launched them, I launched through an e-commerce website, something, like Shopify. And then once I moved my products onto Amazon, within about 6 months, more than 50% of my sales were coming from Amazon. And that holds true to this day. It's now even higher, about 60%. But currently own two different brands. One is called Pro Shot Case. One is called Tidal Sports. And these are products surrounding the underwater world, like snorkeling, scuba diving, iPhone houses to keep your iPhone protected when you're underwater, that type of thing.
Great. Well, we're really lucky to have you here on the team. And with that, let's just jump in what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to talk about some predictions for Q4. And then we're going to talk really about what is your advertising strategy going to be for this specific time period. And then we're going to talk about the fascinating subject of aligning your ad strategy with your inventory plan, something that I think not everyone thinks about right away, but very important. And finally, your discount and pricing strategy for the specific time period. So with that, we wanted to also give a shout out to our upcoming webinar on October 4th. So just saying, if you are interested in learning more about how to succeed in the holidays and going into 2023, we have a really fascinating panelist discussion presentation coming up with not just Andrew, but also Stella Rocket, Chris from Stella Rocket, Emma from Marketing by Emma, who can talk about listing optimization, as well as Randy from Suna, who can talk about ideal product photography and how you can make your products stand out. So a lot of great, useful advertising and marketing tools for the e-commerce seller. So let's first get into the metrics and the data. So I think everyone has seen those crazy videos of people running into the stores, stomping on each other, fighting over who knows what. And I think hopefully those days, maybe they're still here, but realistically, when it comes to Black Friday, I think we could all agree that the online shopping experience is a much more peaceful one. And so that might be why in 2021, Amazon accounted for 17.7% of all Black Friday sales, followed by Walmart, Target, and Best Buy. And in total, $8.9 billion was spent on Black Friday in 2021.
Yeah.
Wild.
And again, that's just Black Friday. This holiday event is really a full weekend going into Cyber Monday. And for some of my customers and my products, I sometimes find that Cyber Monday actually has even better sales than Black Friday. So it's really important to think about, the entire weekend and what your strategy is going to be surrounding it. We also know that during these types of holidays, search volume on Amazon usually increases by somewhere between 100 and 300%, depending on the day. So there's going to be a lot more people searching, a lot more people buying, and it's a really, exciting time of year because of that.
Definitely. And some additional fun facts are 58% of Black Friday 2021 purchases were impulse buys, and 43% of shopping was made on mobile devices. And this really hit home for me because I'm ashamed to say it was last year, pandemic. I was quarantined. I was sitting on the couch with Netflix on, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy a new camera. Like, I'm totally going to become like, once this pandemic is over, I'm going to get out in the world and start taking a lot of photos and live my life. And that was probably a bit of an impulsive purchase, but I imagine that's what a lot of people are thinking when they're making these purchases too.
Yeah, no, that actually really surprised me when I read that report. People it makes sense. They're searching for product ideas. They're searching for gift ideas. And more importantly, they're searching for deals. And I think that's what drives the impulse. When people find, a product that, inspires them and they see that it's 20% off, 25% off, that's when they're really going to be more likely to convert. And just what's really important to remember is that we have seen a significant increase in mobile shopping. So on Amazon, you should absolutely optimize your A+ content and your brand store for mobile content. We know that there's a lot of shoppers, coming through that platform. And while conversion rates are, technically tend to be a little bit lower on mobile, you should still do everything you can to optimize your listings and your brand store.
Definitely. And we do also know that consumer electronics in particular, something that was quite prominent last year were supply chain issues, right? And so we saw that consumer electronics in particular took that inventory hit. And what was your personal experience with this, Andrew, as an Amazon seller?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Across the board, people had supply chain issues, out of stock issues. These statistics are just from Black Friday in 2021. So you can imagine that even after this period, there were even more stockouts and more supply issues. This was a huge problem for sellers. And, it really was because there was a huge shortage in computer chips and just, increasing prices and huge delays for shipping containers. And I experienced this firsthand. I actually had a lot of my products ready by early September. Most of my products come from Taiwan, by the way. So, it's a relatively long shipping time. But they were ready by early September, but I couldn't get on a boat for a full month. Then I knew that there was going to be delays in the port of LA for, at the time, I think there were about 58 to 60 ships just waiting to unload. So the delays just to unload your cargo last year in the port of LA could have been over a month. So I knew that, it wasn't going to work. I'd missed the boat, no pun intended. And I had to airmail all of my inventory, which costs more than $25,000 when a freight shipment usually costs about $5,000 for the same amount of product. So I was spending about 5 times more on shipping. And that's just, what a lot of people had to deal with last year. Pretty frustrating for sellers.
Well, let me bring in some more good news. So this article just came out last Friday. And a lot of people were discussing this and sharing this as Amazon sellers see scary holiday season as consumers pull back. And we know that with inflation, rising costs of travel goods, some are speculating that it could be a different holiday season, whereas last year we were sitting inside, our houses with some stimulus in our pockets, willing to purchase a impulse camera. In this case, we have Leslie from Riverbend saying consumers don't seem to be spending much on anything beyond basic necessities. So sellers have to offer discounts and coupons and aggressive marketing. So what are your thoughts on this? Like, is it a little bit too much? Like, or is this pretty much hitting the nail on the head in terms of what we can expect?
There may be overblowing the scary aspect of it. We're still seeing growth. While yes, it's high single-digit growth in e-commerce, it's still pretty significant growth, especially at a time when the larger economy is not doing so well this year. But what's more interesting is that what I think is very true about this is if you're a seller, you're going to need to figure out some type of deal strategy. There's not going to be that supply crunch. Your competitors are not going to be running out of stock like they potentially were last year. So this is why this year it's more important than ever to really think about what you can afford in terms of discounts, and hopefully you've already started to plan your inventory for offering more aggressive deals this year.
Exactly. And so big picture, what it means, and we're going to move quickly into the more interesting tips. But big picture really is, yes, holidays will look a little bit different from previous years. People might be leaning towards spending on experiences, traveling. At the same time, there's still a lot of great opportunity. The growth is still going to be continued and sustained. But that, as you just said, Andrew, it really means planning for your inventory, planning for your promotion, and being really strategic about your advertising and marketing strategy. which we're here to talk about. And I'll move on to the next section, which is preparing your inventory for Q4. So really thinking about shipping your inventory to FBA before these critical dates. So making sure that your inventory arrives in the warehouses by October. And of course, everyone knows, probably sleeping at night thinking about these dates: Black Friday, November 25th, Cyber Monday, November 28th. And then you got to prepare for Christmas and the holidays, right? Thinking about making sure your inventory arrives in the first days of December, and then Christmas sales until the 24th, and Christmas the 25th. And then you start planning for the next year. Rinse, repeat. And then most importantly, this question: how soon should you start planning for the holidays? And so, Andrew, when I asked you this question, you said June and July. So I'm curious to hear, this sounds quite awfully early. Like, is it really that necessary to start this early to plan for the holidays?
I definitely got a little spooked from what happened last year, just with supply chain issues, but we're still running into problems. It's not like everything has been solved. And I've experienced this firsthand. So I usually think about, my inventory purchases for the Christmas season in early June. I like to get very much ahead of the game. I usually start planning out a minimum of 6 months in advance. And, just to give you an example, I ship most of my products from Taiwan to the port of LA, and I have a 3PL in Chicago. And right now I'm dealing with an unforeseen delay where once our containers reach LA, they get on a train and go to Chicago. And right now there's a 3-week delay for trains arriving and getting unloaded in the Chicago area. So again, you can't plan for these types of things, which is why, yes, maybe, if everything goes perfectly, you could get your products from China or Taiwan into Amazon within 2 to 3 months, but that's very, very rarely the case, especially over the past 2 years. And just to give you specific deadlines, Amazon has a deadline of November 2nd for submitting inventory to make sure that it's available for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And the same is true for Christmas. The deadline is December 1st. So make sure that your inventory is arriving before that date. During this time of year, Amazon has lots of incoming shipments, and their time to receive, unpack, and make products available for Prime takes much, much longer. It's, during a normal week throughout the year, it's usually less than a week. Now they're expecting it to take 3 to 4 weeks to get that process completed. So it's definitely something to stay on top of, stay ahead of, and know what the deadlines are.
Excellent. And we know that Amazon is pretty cagey when it comes to its deadlines. At the same time, if you don't hit those deadlines for the Prime exclusive discounts, you're not going to get them in. You have to get them in ahead of time. So our estimate, and again, this is an estimate, do keep your ears to the ground, seeing exactly when those deadlines are. But based on previous years, we would estimate that around November 22nd or 23rd is when you can expect the deadline for submitting Prime exclusive discounts. So we'll see.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll definitely update everybody by email when we know for sure. It has not been announced.
For sure. So first part, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of your advertising strategy, is first, your ad strategy, avoiding a capped budget. Andrew, can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by a capped budget and why is this important?
For sure. Just to preface it, this is one of the biggest mistakes I see Amazon sellers make. They usually set up a campaign, maybe say, they only want to spend $10 and then just sort of, set it and forget it for a couple of weeks or months before making any optimizations to it. This can be very problematic because Amazon sets a budget by the specific day. So once you run out of budget for a campaign, you're just not going to show your ads for the remaining portion of the day. I've seen some of my customers, when I look at their accounts, a lot of times they're running out of budget for their ads, sometimes 11 in the morning, 12, 1, 2, 3. Anytime before the end of the day is a problem. And it's a problem for 2 reasons. First, the early morning hours tend to be the most competitive on Amazon in terms of advertising, and we see the cost per click rise significantly, usually about 20 to 30%. And that's because everybody's advertising budgets have reset. So everybody has full budget for all of their ads, usually with their highest bids available, and there's very little search volume as well. So this means that the cost per click is going to go up, conversion rates go down, and there's just less people shopping. Then throughout the day, more and more people come online. Amazon's sweet spot is sort of between like 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. That's when there's the most search traffic. So if your campaigns are out of budget, you're missing out on more traffic that has a lower cost per click and generally also has a higher conversion rate. So this is extremely important to make sure that your ads are in budget throughout the entire day, literally 365 days a year. It doesn't even matter if it's during a holiday or not. This strategy should be implemented, throughout the entire year.
And second, you just talked about a little bit more about your cost per click. So tell me more about what should we expect around that as well.
Yeah, so this is more specific to Black Friday and Cyber Monday holidays, but we generally do see the cost per click increase. I personally recommend increasing all of your bids for your keywords and your product targets about 15 to 20% in advance of these holidays. And while you might not want to spend a little bit more, what we see is that conversion rates tend to pick up during these holidays as well. It makes sense. There's lots of deals out there. People are more likely to check out. People are buying gifts. And as we saw before, there's a lot of impulse buying going on. So don't be afraid to increase your cost per click because you're going to be rewarded by a higher conversion rate. And just to put some numbers behind that, in general, Amazon's conversion rate is about 9 to 10%. And we generally find during holidays like Prime Day or Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that increases to about 12% plus. And this is just on average. We can see things vary, depending on the specific product and the customer. Our largest customers has conversion rate 5 to 6%. Over the last Prime Day, their conversion rate went above 10%. So that's an incredibly significant move. If you're doubling your conversion rate, then it's a no-brainer to spend a little bit more on your cost per click.
Perfect. And then second, it's really tempting to think about these keywords, especially keywords like Christmas gift or gifts for brother-in-law. What are your thoughts on bidding on these keywords? Like, shouldn't this be something that can help me get my product in front of customers?
I've been experimenting with bidding on these types of keywords for 7 years, and I will say it very, very rarely works. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So first of all, if your product is not, the perfect fit for that keyword, like the perfect gift for mom, then there's going to be what I call a lot of click waste, where people see an interesting idea, they're doing a lot of shopping, they're just trying to get ideas about what products to buy their mom, which means they're going to click on tons of different products, tons of different ads until they eventually land on something that they find compelling. So this click waste is essentially just going to waste money for you. In addition to this, if your product is not, isn't that compatible with a lot of these, holiday keywords, whether it's gifts for mom, gifts for dad, stocking stuffers, things like that. These are keywords that explode in search volume during the holiday season and then completely crash afterwards. So you're not even really getting anything back in terms of improving your organic ranking for these keywords, because the search volume is just going to disappear. So you might be spending a lot on a keyword that's not going to be profitable through the remainder of the year as well.
Perfect. And moving quickly to the next strategy. So brand analytics report. So this is currently available on Amazon, correct? And what kind of information can I find from this brand analytics report?
Sure. So what we have here is, this is a simple report, I believe, from the last Christmas season that just ranks all of the keywords by search volume and then gives you a couple of products that, had significant sales in that category. So this just, this can give you an idea of what people were searching for. And it's a good way to find keywords that might fit some of your products. What's even more interesting about brand analytics is if you do have a brand store, which I hope most e-sellers out there do, you get even more detailed information through this new brand analytics data. And this is something that we at Mayan have been experimenting with and have found incredibly useful for understanding how your brand is performing based on specific keywords. So we obviously don't have any of our customers' data up here, but if you were to click into your specific brand analytics, it would show you how many impressions you're getting for each keyword that's important to your brand. And it shows you the entire funnel. So it's going to show you the impressions, how many clicks you got, how many conversions you got, or how many add to carts and how many checkouts or conversions you got. So analyzing that data is very useful, and especially understanding the impression share for a specific keyword. Because if your impression share is low, meaning that for a given search term, you're maybe only showing up 5% of the time, there is a big opportunity there, assuming this is a good keyword, for you to bid up, increase the spend, really attack that keyword and try to own it, and increase your impression share to at least 20 or 25%.
Perfect. And then another strategy here is bidding on branded keywords. So that would be, for example, your brand is ProShot, right, Andrew? So that would be bidding on your own brand, or what exactly does this entail here?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I get a lot of pushback on this sometimes from newer sellers or some of the customers that we have. But the theory is that Amazon has added so much ad placement to their platform that even if you're ranking in position 1, you're still not really showing up at the top of the page. And so what I always recommend is bidding, not only on your branded keywords. That's sort of a no-brainer. You want to make sure your products are showing up at the top of the search, especially when people are looking for your specific product. But I also like to implement a strategy where I add some of my other products that may be complements or substitutes and bid on my own product pages. As most of you probably know, on any given product page, there's sponsored display and about 20 different options for sponsored product placement. And that's just opportunity for competitors to show their product on your own product page. And that really bothers me sometimes, to be honest. You've probably already paid to get somebody to your product page, and now Amazon is flooding that with more ads of more competitors. Anyways, we work within the Amazon.
Thanks, Amazon.
Yes, seriously. So, adding some of your products to your product pages, targeting your ASINs for your other products is a very effective strategy, especially if you have complementary or substitute products. And it's something that I always do. And it's also a little bit psychological. Instead of seeing all these other brands, they're seeing that you have a lot of different products in the same category. They have options to choose from, and it makes people more likely to check out and trust your brand. So this is a quick example of a sponsored ad. This was for my title mask, just one of my products. And you can see here that I am bidding on the title mask keyword, because even though I'm position number 1 organically, I still want to show up at the top of search. We know that about 40% of clicks go to the first 4 sponsored product ads at the top of search. So it is really imperative to have your product show up in that placement.
Got it. And I'm going to move quickly because we want to have time for questions at the end as well. We still got a lot to cover. But pausing momentarily, we've talked a lot about your approach to advertising. Say if you're advertising on your own, you're spending maybe 40 to 50 hours a week advertising and managing those ads. So a little bit about Mayan's approach to advertising. So Mayan provides both expert-led advertising management services powered by AI-driven technology. And what does this mean? It means an automated full campaign coverage. It also, within that, it means ASIN targeting tool, meaning you have some opportunities to target that competition. You can also expand your keywords, being able to find and discover new keywords without doing it manually. Also, the ability to add negative keywords, making sure you're not wasting ad spend on keywords that are not relevant to your product. And then finally, features that allow you to align your advertising strategy with your inventory strategy, and so much more. And I actually have a picture here of our COO, Chris Campion, with our customers here, High Desert. And they started as a small business, very much being able to expand their business through Amazon. And we really pride ourselves on close partnerships with our customers. So stay tuned. At the very end, we're going to offer a free advertising audit, which Andrew can talk a little bit more about at the very end as well. So moving quickly with aligning your advertising strategy with your inventory plan. So Andrew, have you ever had this situation happen to you where you're kind of grabbing your hair because your inventory ran out?
Yep, it definitely happens. I've worked really hard to prevent it as much as possible, but even so, you can plan as far ahead in advance as you want, but sometimes it just happens, and it's going to happen. You need to figure out what steps to take when you do run out of inventory to protect yourself as much as possible.
Right, because in that case, if your sponsored product advertising becomes inactive, you drop sales, you drop visibility, you drop ranking, and spiral of doom.
Yep.
But there are ways you can mediate this. And first thing you can do is actually, this is Mayan school of thought, is turn off your advertising. Some will advise you to slowly, gradually decrease your advertising. But we say we're in the school of pause your ads based on your remaining days of inventory, because maybe if you have one product, this is basically something you can do. But if you're managing tons of products, it's not going to be a good use of your time to be manually decreasing your advertising. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and at Mayan, we have an automation that takes care of this, and we can set up custom timeframes or days of inventory that the account manager sets up based on your business, but we're able to pause advertising automatically. I like to set it up with 5 days of inventory. That tends to be the standard, but it also depends how long it takes your products to get restocked from your 3PL. Hopefully, you have products to restock in the US. I know that sometimes that's not always the case. But on the reverse side, it's very important to not restart your advertising before your products are actually available for Prime. So this is something that Amazon doesn't take into account. When you actually ship your boxes back into Amazon, as soon as the tracking is scanned, Amazon will make your products available for sale, but it will have a ship by date of 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 weeks in advance, which we know will crush conversion rates, usually by about 50% if there's not that immediate Prime shipping delivery window.
Exactly. So that's our school of thought. And second thing that you can do as well is optimize your product details page, and perhaps you can nudge customers to other related products on your store. So if you are out of inventory for one, maybe you can still advertise a related product. And here's one example of how you can create some A+ content around, just basically, hey, you have this one camera and you have another camera, and then you have a different camera of different sizing and features. And maybe if you're out of stock of the lower one, maybe you can nudge customers to even get the more premium one. So an example there.
Increase that AOV, average order value.
Ooh, there you go. And then this is kind of a duh, but yeah, restock as soon as possible. I don't think anyone is probably thinking of this as not a possibility, but it had to be said because the longer you wait, the more sales you miss out on. And then finally, prevention is the cure, of course. Practicing efficient inventory management. Like you, Andrew, starting really early, even if it seems a little bit too early. Is it too early, really? Is it too early? Because there's going to be a lot of unexpected curveballs going around in the world. So be proactive and prepare in advance as much as possible.
Just a quick example. I've talked to some of the larger aggregators like Thrasio and Perch, and they are literally making their holiday inventory purchase decisions as early as February or March. So they are, even hyper focused on it. They know that running out of stock is a huge problem. And the better you can manage this issue, the better your long-term success will be on Amazon.
So finally, your discount and pricing strategy. This is another question is like, hey, do I need to increase my prices to decrease them? Do I need to decrease my prices dramatically to even compete, you know. So basically, what's the strategy around here, especially if it's going to be such a, you know, uncertain season? So I think the first thing that we really are emphasizing, again, we talked about this earlier, but Prime exclusive discounts being the number one way to offer something for these types of Amazon holidays. And again, we talked about the deadlines earlier, but making sure that you get those requests in advance for approval.
Exactly. So, normally over Black Friday or Cyber Monday, if you do nothing, if you offer no discounts, you'll probably see a slight sales lift. With, the average of our customers was around 50%, a little below that. But if you do offer a discount, most of our customers see a 200 to 300% sales lift. That is why, especially this year where there's going to be a little bit more competition, not nearly as many supply chain issues, and very likely more sellers are going to offer more and steeper discounts. So it is very important to think about, how much of a discount can you afford? And for a Prime exclusive discount, the minimum you can discount your products by is 20%. So hopefully you all have the margins built in that you can afford, a temporary 20% drop in the price, especially when that should increase your sales by roughly 200 to 300%, depending on the day. So this is very important. And like Julia said, submitting these early is important. They do have to get approved. When you're actually setting up the Prime exclusive discount, there is a checkbox you'll have to click that says this is a deal for Black Friday and or Cyber Monday. Make sure you do that. That's going to let Amazon know that these are deals that they are going to promote. They're going to push harder. They are going to, in a sense, help you and promote your products more because you're offering this type of discount. So, really important to get ahead of the game, and really important to start thinking, now about, how much you can discount your products and what that's going to mean for your inventory position for the rest of December, the rest of the holiday season.
Exactly. And then coupons. I mean, the old days, you had a coupon book, you can snip them out and you go into the store in person. So it seems almost it seems strange to have an electronic coupon, right? Will it really have that same physiological satisfaction of, having something that you collect and you find? But in fact, coupons really can help drive organic rank. So Andrew, how exactly is that being used, and how effective is it really as a strategy?
It's a good question. I personally almost always have a coupon running on most of my products. I reduce them or remove them during the holiday season sometimes, just because you can't necessarily afford to have a 20% discount or more and an additional discount with a coupon. Again, that's a decision that's personal to every business owner. But it is very effective, especially when you're launching new products, and just, forcing the buyer to actually physically click on that button is it's a way of making them really understand that they're going to save money if they check out, and it actually improves conversion rates for those products. So that's why I always recommend coupons. Also, only about 50% of consumers actually click that coupon button. So if you're offering a 10% discount, it doesn't mean that every product you sell is going to be discounted 10%. Usually it's only about 50%. Of consumers who click it. So that means your effective discount is usually about half of what you offer for that coupon. So that's something important to keep in mind, when you set this up.
Yeah, and I think with Black Friday, it's especially a badge of honor to have gotten a deal. And I think that's really what people are looking for. They're looking for that that psychological satisfaction of, I waited this time to purchase this thing to get this specific deal. And definitely this drives that psychology, but some might miss it.
And people are definitely waiting for deals. I was looking at a report the other day that showed that about the week leading up to Black Friday generally has much lower conversion rates and lower search volume. People are, not interested in converting or checking out or purchasing until they know that there's going to be a big discount. So that was, kind of obvious, but pretty interesting to see the data behind it.
That actually makes sense. They're scoping it out, they're researching, maybe they're saving that link and be like, okay, I'm going to visit this page again on
Yeah.
that day. So that concludes our presentation. And with that, we're going to open it up to some questions. But before we do that, we wanted to talk a little bit about this opportunity of our free Amazon advertising audit. And so this is actually an opportunity for you to learn about areas of growth in your business. So Andrew, is this something that is, what exactly is an advertising audit and what can I get away from? Like what information can I come away from this?
Sure. And, this is something that Mayan offers for free for people who attended this webinar. Essentially, an advertising audit, and I've done, hundreds of these at this point, but we require that the sellers give us view access to their advertising central on Amazon. Then we can download reports. We can work with a lot of the data. We usually pull about 90 days of advertising data. We crunch the numbers, run them through some of our algorithms, and then create a presentation that we can, step by step sort of line up what we're seeing as missed opportunities in your account, what's going wrong, how it can be improved, and then make a plan of how to, really manipulate things so that we can help our customers reach their goals in the future. And that's all laid out in a succinct, it usually takes about half hour to 45 minutes presentation, but you'll get a lot of good data, whether you sign up with us or not. I'd say it's a very worthwhile exercise to go through just so you can understand what mistakes you might be making or what other opportunities there might be within the Amazon advertising ecosystem.
So I don't need to sign up for Mayan in order to get this information, do I?
Definitely not. It's a free advertising audit, no strings attached.
Well, I guess what we hope is that the information that we present to you is so compelling and so informative that you would be interested in partnering with us. And for example, we have here Lou from Bazillion Dreams, who experienced a 267% increase in just 3 months. And that was by Mayan being able to identify diamond products, being able to align his advertising strategy to be more focused and more strategic. So we're pretty confident that we would be able to provide some pretty good results for your business as well. So feel free to visit try.mayan.co/free advertising audit or access that QR code.
Great. And just one thing, I'd like to add is that, we have some really great, machine learning and AI powered tools that help the account managers do their job really well. But no AI is perfect. And it's impossible for AI to build out a full-blown strategy for brands which are incredibly unique and diverse and all have different challenges and different issues they need to work through. So it's, really important to understand is that at Mayan, you will be working with an account manager like myself that has either is still selling and owns brands or has sold their companies on Amazon and sold products on Amazon. They all have extensive Amazon selling experience. And I think that's one thing that's really unique about Mayan as a company is that there's a account manager who has lots of experience who is going to dive into your products, really understand your company and figure out what needs to be done in order for you to reach your goals, whether that's improving profitability or growing as much as possible on the platform.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. With that, we have a question that came in. So holidays, let's talk about product launches. So would you say that the holidays is a good time to launch a new product?
Absolutely. So the short answer is yes. So the long answer is, I think you should launch a product once you're very comfortable that it's ready. But, personally, I like to time a lot of my product launches to sort of happen in October to November. And the reason for this is that you can get a little bit of sales history before the holiday season, where we know that reviews are going to be slightly less important. There's a lot of impulse buying, and there's just increased search volume and traffic during those times. People are looking for new items. They're looking for gift items. So I strongly recommend, trying to time your product launches to, the holidays, not you don't want to launch it on November 23rd, but probably a month or two, ahead of time, so that you can get a little bit of, data under your belt, maybe a handful of reviews, and then really try to accelerate that growth going into the next year.
Great. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for everyone for attending and for your questions. Again, if you have any questions, we will send out an email with the recording of the webinar, as well as the invitation shortly to our October 4th webinar coming up. So we're really excited for that great group of partners. So thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. It's great being with you.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.